Hello and welcome to this presentation on scripting in MOVEit Automation. My name is Richard Auger. I'm Principal Technical Consultant at Protocol. I've been working with the MOVEit suite of products since 2004. So MOVEit Automation, what are the varying ways that we can interact with automation using scripts? Historically, or at least as far back as I can remember, MOVEit, central as it was then, always used to come with a set of predefined VB scripts that you could put into the middle of a task to process a file after it's been downloaded. Some of these scripts you could actually run just as a standalone process without needing to involve files. And according to what license you had, you could customize them, you could make your own scripts up and roll your own VB. So MOVEit Automation, or MOVEit Central as it was then, had an administration API. So we could do this using a Windows COM object or Java if you were on another machine and needed to talk to the Windows MOVEit Central server. This also came with the command line interface tool. We'll be seeing the command line interface in just a little bit. We'll take a look at that in real time. Now, more recently, in the past few years, we've seen that MOVEit Automation now has PowerShell as well as VB capability. So if, like me, you're one of those people that prefers PowerShell to VB, this was a really nice feature to be added. And finally, on the scripting side of things, we now have a REST API. So now that we have this nice web GUI on MOVEit Automation, the whole thing is based around a REST API interface. So it's killing two birds with one stone. They introduce the REST API, and that becomes an easier way to manage the product, as you don't need to have installed the API locally on your machine, first of all. So let's take a very quick look at how a PowerShell script sits inside MOVEit Automation. Well, if you want to write your own scripts, PowerShell is an easy choice to go to. There is a lot of content out on the internet for doing stuff with PowerShell. We have ways to interact with MOVEit Automation and affect variables. You can see on the right-hand side of the screen there, I am setting some PowerShell variables based upon information that's being passed to me via MOVEit Automation. Then if I want to, I can pass this information back in again to automation once I've processed it and done whatever I need to be doing. Now, when you do a script, you can simply import a script, okay, and then modify it if you want, or just leave it as is. Or else you've got the ability to code directly inside the application. Now, this is quite a change from the old VB script where you'd have to export the script, make the changes that you want, and then import it back in, and always remember to get the right version that you were pulling in. Let's take a very quick look at what we can do using PowerShell inside automation and one sample script. Okay, so we're going to do a very quick script in PowerShell inside a MOVEit task, just to show you the kind of things that you can easily accomplish. This particular script is one that I've run with previously. It comes up quite often. I'm asked for it. If I go and take a look at it, you'll see that what we're doing is we're actually sending a message to Teams. So before we run this, I need to set up my Teams so that looks correct. We're going to come across to, I've got another tab here, and I've got a channel on Teams that is empty at the moment. I've just created it. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on the three dots on the end here, and we'll add in a connector. And we want the webhook connector. And there we go. Let's just add that in. Okay, there's nothing to do on here at the moment. We'll just hit the add button. That will be in now. And now we just return to that connectors page again. And we'll just do a quick configure on the webhook. So if we click onto that now, I'm going to give it a name of MOVEit. Doesn't really matter what the name is, that's just for human reference, and we'll do create. Now we'll just take a look at the bottom of the page once this has been created, and we've got a lovely big webhook at the bottom here that we can use. So I'm going to copy that to clipboard, jump across to our team script. Now let me just edit this, and I'm just going to completely replace that URL with the new one. Okay, so let's take a look what we're doing here. We're setting some parameters at the top of the script first of all. Now these could be regular macros. We could be getting error information, error description, and the name of the task, for example, and whatever else we want to include in the Teams message. By setting the parameters at the task level and passing them through, it will allow us to use one task for managing this Teams call, and we'll just call that as the next action, passing some parameters from a task that we're in. So we have a little block of JSON in the middle of the script, and all that JSON's doing really is just saying that we're going to create a message in Teams. You can add some formatting if you want. There's nothing against doing that. And then once we've got that, obviously, we're just going to twig that into an actual JSON string. We're going to insert this into an invoke REST method call. So let's just save this now. Okay, and we can go to tasks now. So here I've got a task called MOVEit user group. And you can see it's running this custom script Teams. If I go and have a look at the task parameters, then we've got those three parameters that I referenced inside the script itself. Okay, and obviously these at this point can be macros, and it could be any number of these that you want. So I'm going to very quickly just show you, better click the done button on that, and I just show you that we have nothing over here left to do. We've got one message showing us that the webhook was created. Now, hopefully, if I click run now, it's very quick to run, we immediately get a response. Okay, and I can do that as many times as I want, and each time it's just going to push something new into my Teams channel. So if you're fed up of getting all the emails and you just want to have a small log in your Teams view, then you make use of this. Microsoft do have some specific rules though about actually using this for long-term storage of logs. So, you know, as far as we're concerned, messages or alerts are fine, but full-blown logs may not be. All right, so now let's take a look at the command line interface. Now, the command line interface comes with the API install. So unlike the REST API, which is natively there, if you've installed the web UI, this time around you've got to install that COM API either on the machine or on a different machine. Now, commonly you'll use this if you have a scheduling tool and you want to have your scheduling tool kick off transfers in automation once it's done some processing. So for example, if you're talking to a SAP system and you're pulling back some iDocs, once you've actually pulled those iDocs back, you can automatically trigger automation to transfer them. Now, in version 13 of MOVEit Automation, it became necessary for users to authenticate themselves when they log in to MOVEit Automation. That holds true for the API as well. So when you're using the command line interface, you have to authenticate, you have to give it a username, have to give it a password as well. You can see some of the parameters that I've listed up there by just passing the command on its own. It gives you a nice little breakdown of what you need to be passing it and what you'll see coming back. Now you do have options in there to wait for the task to complete. So if you're launching a task, you can wait for it to complete and then pull back the result. Let's take a look at that running. Okay, let's take a very quick look at the command line interface. You can use the command line interface to start tasks remotely, so we can put this into a batch scheduler of some kind. Before you can use the command line interface, and also the same with the COM API, we have to first install the API on here. And we're going to install the API. I've done it on this machine already by finding it into the program files directory. And we're going to look into MOVEit and API. Okay, and just pull the API out of the zip file, execute it, run as administrator. It will update the path profile or the path variable. And that means that for that to actually come into play, you're going to have to log out of the machine and log back in again. Once you've got that, you can just call up the executable on its own. So we don't need any parameters on. That's just going to give us a nice big help splash. Okay, and we can talk about some of these parameters now very quickly. Host is an obvious one. If you're running on the same machine, it's not required. It's always going to default back to that machine. I would think from a scheduler, unless you've got a scheduling agent on a machine, you'll probably be using the host. You definitely need to be specifying the user and password now. So this is new. In versions older than 13, where you did not have to authenticate to access MOVEit locally, you could get away with this, but if you're moving over to a 13.1 and onwards, then you'll need that on there as well. And then we can either start a task by its name or by the ID and provide some parameters to it at the same time. Remember, some of your tasks will have parameters in there. Afterwards, we can wait for a task to complete or not. So what I think we'll do is we're going to try that now. Let's see, I think I've probably got one of these. There we are. And we're going to try it without the wait sex on. And this should immediately complete and return back to us. Now it's not waiting for the task to finish. This is a little sleep task, doesn't do anything else. I've got it up here in the background already. If we look at this sleep, then all it's doing is just running a sleep command for 15 seconds. There's nothing more intelligent than that one in there. All right, so if we do call that back up, and this time we put this wait sex 60 on there, then it's going to wait for up to 60 seconds. Now we know that this task is going to complete in 15 seconds, so there's no point waiting the whole 60, but it's not a problem. As soon as it gets to 15 seconds and the task has completed, it's going to return control back to us again. There we go. So we can see there that, yep, 15 seconds passed and it's back to us. We didn't have to wait the full minute for that to complete. It just felt like I talked for a minute then. There are some other options that we can throw in there. So we can do some debugging of our task if we want to, and we can push that off into a file. If we want to get the results, a similar sort of result set to this, we can also save that, and we can also we can drop some XML into another file, which can then pass on to another process, presumably. Okay, so the COM API. The COM API, that's where we're going to find this command line interface. Unlike the REST API, you do have to install it on the machine that you want to run it on. Normally, this is going to be the MOVEit Automation machine, but it doesn't need to be. It can be put anywhere you like. As well as being able to interact to submit tasks and even to create tasks, we'll talk about that next, we can use the COM API to generate reports. Okay, it's got a rather nice little option in there, or function in there, the run custom SQL, which will allow you to produce a report listing, say, for example, all of the files that are being processed in a period of time. For me, the best feature of the COM API is the ability to create hosts and tasks using a script of some kind. Okay, so these can be permanent hosts and permanent tasks if you want, or we can create transient tasks. Okay, a task that we launch, it runs, and then it disappears from the system. Now, of course, in a lot of scenarios, you don't really want to do that. You want to have the original task there. But if you're going to make some dynamic changes to a task, sure, why not actually change the directory structure that it's picking up from or delivering to. So every time we do something using the COM API, what we need to do is to pull back a task definition or host definition or whatever we want as an XML. Then we can modify that XML. Once we've modified it, we can load that back into MOVEit Automation, our new entity, whether it be a task or host or what have you. And we can use this very same feature to update global parameters. Now, it's always been one of those little annoyances that when you're running tasks in MOVEit, you know that you've got a global parameter that you set one time, you use it everywhere, but you can't set it on the fly. You can't update that global parameter with a task. Okay, so here, using this API, you can. So let's say you want to keep track of the number of files that have been processed in a day. We can create that as just a variable, a global parameter, and we can just enumerate it and just add to it, increment it all the way through the day as we need to. All right, let's see how that works in practice. Okay, so let's take a look at the COM API. Now, the COM API you can use locally if you install the API on the server, that's not a problem. If you install the API somewhere else, the installer for the API itself comes as part of the utilities folder when you do an install of MOVEit Automation. It's quite simple and straightforward. It's an object-oriented API. So you can see here, I am connecting, I'm defining what my host is I'm going to. I'm only going locally. I authenticate myself, I make a connection. Now what we do then is we're going to get the XML of a task. It's the same as just exporting a task. And the task that I'm going to use is one called sleep. So it's just going to pull back my little bit of XML. I can then make some changes to that and send it off to run. Now the change that I'm doing, and you see that I've got a nice little for loop here. I'm going to go around 19 times around the loop. I should, for cleanliness, have made it 20, but let's just keep it as 19. And all we're doing is I'm changing the name of the task because I can't have 20 versions or 19 versions of the same task running concurrently. Let's just give a unique name for each one. But on these attributes, there are many, many things that you could be changing. You could be changing the source, the destination. You can use it to clone a basic template task. Now, in this particular script, I'm using start new task, and that creates a temporary version that's just there for the execution period, and afterward it's gone. You don't save it into your MOVEit Automation. There is a similar command that you can use, just start task, which will keep something or will use an existing task from inside your MOVEit. Okay, so if I just haul up my PowerShell prompt, and there we are, I'm just going to call this start sleep PS1. Now, each one of these numbers that I can see on the side there is telling me the ID of the task. I did actually fudge these a little bit inside the script itself. When you're doing a temporary task, you shouldn't use a real ID, but anything over the 8 octets, anything over 10 million as a task ID is going to be fine. So you can just pick out a number as you like there. And for me, I've just started with one number and then just add in whatever this I is, whichever execution of the loop I'm on. If I look at the old GUI, I can see I've got a number of these running at the moment. Okay, so they all started a minute or so ago. If I look at the new web GUI, not always quite so easy to see, but I want to get my dummy tasks that are currently executing. Now, these have not yet finished, so they're showing a duration of less than 1 second at the moment. In fact, I don't expect them to finish for 10 minutes really, so they'll keep going and then I'm going to get some kind of result in there. Now, that's going to allow me just to look onto my next script that I'd like to demonstrate. And this particular script, all that it's doing is it's just getting a view on the currently executing tasks. Now, there are many things that you can do with this script. You see it starts off with the same way. I authenticate against the MOVEit Automation COM API. And then I do a very simple command, which is just show running tasks. I can read in that XML. PowerShell is very nice for reading XML. Go through and just check how many tasks there are. So if you're planning on shutting down your MOVEit system for patching or some such thing, this is a great way to see that there are no tasks running before we do that. So we can put this whole thing into a loop, and we can just come back and check every 30 seconds until we get 0 tasks executing. You have to have disabled the scheduler first of all, though. That's not something that we can achieve through the COM API. So this is running tasks.ps1. Let's see if I can auto-complete that. Okay, and it does a very quick through. It's just telling me all the tasks that are executing, and it's just enumerated those as 19 at the end. Very simple, very straightforward. The COM API in many ways is easier to run with than the REST API, but the functionality between the two varies. So really it's good to not pick one over the other and just ignore the alternate one. Now we can use the REST API to manage some tasks. Okay, so different to the COM API, we don't need to make an installation of anything. It's just there already. As long as you've installed the web interface, and I would hope that you've got the web interface installed with your system, then everything that you need is available there as a Swagger library. So you can go straight to Swagger and get all of the information that you need to help you do some scripting. Let's have a look at how the REST API looks in real life. Okay, so we're going to take a quick look at a REST API script, and this is calling the MOVEit Automation REST API. So you start off by first authenticating yourself. You know, we need some credentials that we're going to pass across to the system. We need to say what system we're going to. Information that we have up the top here is specifying how we're going to get on with SSL. So, you know, we're going to make a secure connection no matter what we do. So once we've got this information, what do? We're going to pass it across and get our access token. So we build everything into a JSON file. There's our credentials going in there. We invoke a web request, and we're going to pass that JSON file across to the web request, and then we'll get back some JSON in response. Everything that we see as a reply from the REST API is going to come as JSON format. Now, PowerShell very nicely lets you just easily work your way through JSON. So here, for example, we're reading the JSON string that's returned, and we're just going to get the access token out of that string. And then for performing our actions against the MOVEit system, we can use that access token to authenticate ourselves. So here we are. The first thing that we're going to see there is you've got the tasks node mentioned. If you had a look through the Swagger interface, you're going to see that you can be going for tasks, you can be going for hosts, etc., etc. If you go for tasks, you'll find the subgroup under tasks of scheduler. Now the scheduler interacts with the scheduler quite naturally. If you execute this, if you make a call to the web request with just the scheduler and no parameters on there, it's going to return the status of the scheduler requests. And again, we're going to pull that status apart. We're going to look through the JSON, and we're going to get the status node out of that JSON file. The status node is normally either going to be scheduler disabled by operator or scheduler enabled. And in our case, if the scheduler is disabled, we're going to perform an action of starting, or if it's enabled, we're going to stop it. Okay, so here we're going to do our call to the API again, and this time we're passing that action parameter. That's either going to be our stop or start. And we actually make the call. We're not particularly interested in a response from it. We could I suppose check the return code on there if you want to be a bit meticulous. That would be a good thing to do, I imagine. And then finally, we're just going to check the status to see what's happened. And we'll invoke the web request, we'll pull back the JSON, and we'll print some output. So we're going to do stop scheduler PS1. Okay, it was enabled. We've issued a stop, and now it's telling us that it's disabled. I'll run that same script again, and we're going to reverse that. It's currently disabled. Now we're going to do a start to it, and now it's enabled. So you can imagine if you're coming up towards a maintenance time, let's say you've got to reboot your servers for Windows patching. You could have this as the first part of your script, just to disable the scheduler. You know, if it's up, we're going to stop it. And then after that, we can do a check using the API again. I've not included it here, but it's not that challenging, just to see if we've got any tasks still executing. Now, maybe you want to sleep and check again and sleep and check again at 10-second intervals or something. And once all of the automation tasks are finished, or you got tired of waiting, then you can perform the service shutdown. And that could all be in one script. So this means that you're automating your restarts of the servers, then you can just launch this script and it will stop your service in a clean way without interrupting any in-process tasks. Okay, so to summarize what I've just been discussing, the key points of automation is that we can use the scripting inside automation to make automation work better for us. If we need to, we can call automation tasks, we can start an automation task from another product. Okay, we can use that command line interface to do that. We can install a COM API, either locally on a machine or another machine, to manage tasks, to duplicate tasks, to add in a whole suite of tasks if we need to, or we can install it locally. Maybe we want to use that inside a workflow. And finally, we can use the REST API to remotely manage automation. Okay, REST API is the future somewhat if you're not there already. It really does allow us to do everything that we need to do to interact with an application like automation without having to worry about keeping our software up to date and downloading executables and so on. Okay, thanks very much for your attention.